don't know that I've done it this way before. Normally I have a specific live stream that I've set up through YouTube first, and then I connect it to the Zoom meeting. And all right, cool. Let me make sure that my microphone setup's right. Good here. A second. Are you picking up a lot of background noise?
No.
Okay. Cool. All right, I think we're good to go. Let's. So I'm Seth Stewart. I'm the host here at Truth from Earth. We're just going over this latest organizing convention from the Utah GOP, and I don't want to be too bombastic here, but there are a lot of feelings. This is our last truly Republican convention. I'm not saying that as a defeatist perspective, but just as a updating. If I were to update people as to the lay of the land, as to what happened on Saturday, I would say that's when the last little shred of red from our country actually died. That's when we handed over to the establishment the last speckle of really truly Republican government. So this is kind of an open mic night, and so people can come and go. But I'll probably just paste in the meeting chat here what the link to it is, so anybody who's watching from YouTube can just join us. And it's intended to be something of a conversation, something of a communication, and yeah, let us know how you're feeling about things. Here, I think I almost got it right. I have a character I need to fix in the. It didn't include a new line where there's supposed to be a new line. Sorry. Oh, never mind. It's not letting me do new lines. I need to do a space instead. I forgot that about YouTube chat messages. There we go. All right. Now it's got spaces, and now the link should actually work if people want to click that. There we go. Cool. Yeah, apologies for that. And Miranda, welcome. You're the first guest on here. Do you want to go ahead and give yourself a brief introduction, and then let's talk about the convention?
Well, sorry for my background. I'm just laying on my daughter's bed. I had surgery a couple months ago, and so I've kind of been hanging out here a lot. I've been involved for about 20 years since I got involved in the party in 2006 at caucus, coming out of caucus as precinct chair, county delegate, and state delegate. Took me a while to separate which hat I was wearing. I knew what my responsibilities were, but couldn't necessarily keep track of which role I was actually playing. Met a lot of cool people, got involved in the Tea Party as that happened. A lot of rallies, a lot of fun, a lot of personalities. And it was just a really cool thing to be involved. We had the Patrick Henry caucus at that time. There was a lot of things that were going on, and a lot of neat people and personalities that were very energetic and liberty-minded. And I've really enjoyed this last round with Lyman's crew all last summer. The energy was very much the same as it had been during the Tea Party. And it was really fun to see everybody rising up and fighting again. I think we lost some of that in spots, and it was really great to be able to rally around something like that again.
That's great, wonderful. Yeah. So and my experience with it goes really just back to 2016. So I've been doing this 10 years fewer than you have. And I lived in Provo at the time. It was my first time voting in a precinct caucus. We were first time Utah voting eligible residents. I was going to school at the time at Brigham Young University, and I was residing in the state, technically full time or full enough time that I could get Utah residency. So, and then in how I got involved was a sacrament meeting, and the bishop read over the pulpit this statement from the first presidency saying we need to get involved in the caucus. And specifically, they even called out that there was a new nominating petition route, the signature route, SB 54, that would be active that year for the first time. And so they advised us of that and then said, go participate in the caucus. I thought that was very interesting. So I've brought this up on my channel here before and to delegates and people far and wide just to say the prophets warned us about SB 54. They said, hey, heads up, this is there, right? And they urged us to get involved in the caucus, which SB 54 is antithetical to the caucus. In fact, if they count my vote, people had their way. I've read their petition to the lieutenant governor's office, and they would totally destroy the caucus if they could get their way. And part of the way that I have come to see that is that we need to back up and look at the Constitution. So like something that's been really weird to me is to see we do elections really in a really strange way. And here in Utah, it's even more obvious because a lot of people are familiar with general elections, which are done by a direct popular vote. A lot of people are familiar with primaries, direct primaries, which are done through, again, a popular vote within a party, though. Not a lot of people are familiar with the caucus and the convention. But all three times, it's the exact same question. It's like, who should be your next governor? Or who should be, in your Senate? Who should win the Senate race? Who should win the House race? Whatever. For any office, they will use this three-stage monstrosity here in Utah, and a lot of other states, it's not even a three-stage, it's a two-stage or something like that. States might have their own different bells and whistles. That's one of the things that got me thinking about it. It's like, that seems costly, that seems expensive, that seems redundant. Why would we do that? And what I've come to learn is that originally under the Constitution, there were three different election methods. You had a direct popular vote for House of Representatives races. You had an indirect method like the caucus and convention for executive branch races, so governor, lieutenant governor, but think of like the electoral college, what that was supposed to be at the federal level. And you have actual delegates who go and vet the candidates, which our modern electoral college does not do, importantly, because most of the delegates there are bound delegates. They're not actually free to choose, which means they're not really electors, which means we're not really following the Constitution, are we? And then for Senate races, those were supposed to be done through a legislative election. So the legislators would get together and they'd choose who would represent the state in the Senate. And so I refer to those as red, white, and blue elections, hopefully for kind of obvious reasons. Red is more Republican, blue is more Democratic, and then white is the legislative. And I love that approach because it makes so much more sense than what we do in our elections today. And that red, this is the thing. Utah, like you said earlier, like it's one of very few states that even has a caucus system anymore. And I think you said it's the only state that actually kept that system from earlier.
I heard that we have three, and I forget who the other two are. But yeah, but it used to be the way that was used, and the other states have lost it. They've given it up voluntarily.
Yeah,
for the
and
most part.
That's interesting. That's fascinating because I don't want to give that up because what I can see is having distinct election methods means that the people in government are actually meaningfully different as to their representation and their loyalties and so on, which means you actually have checks and balances. I mean, the founding fathers were super concerned about that. They were like, hey, senators should, you should have two per state. And then House representatives, yeah, that can be proportional to population. And that way there's kind of a more populist component to Congress, and there's kind of a more, state-centric approach. But that's only meaningful if their accountabilities to the people who elect them are different. If the people who elect them are different, or the method is meaningfully different. And so what's happened is the check has been turned on us. We're in check right now because we have to contend and compete and fight amongst ourselves about the convention winner versus the primary. And so the count my vote folks just have to say the people behind it egregiously dishonest in their reports to the press and so on, claiming that the delegates are out of touch with the general public because the convention winner that outcome differs from the direct popular vote in the primary. That completely glosses over the fact that in the Constitution, those are separate by design. And the Supreme Court has even recognized that they produce different outcomes. That's what Phil Lyman's petition to the Supreme Court found. The Supreme Court itself has upheld that finding. You change the method, you change the outcome. And but one of the awesome things about the caucus and convention is that we actually get to vet the candidates up close. We get to, because I've never met Barack Obama. I likely never will. You know, I didn't know really anything hardly about Donald Trump before he ran for office because I'm not that connected with the media or the deep state or all that, politicians. And so these people run for office and we don't even know them. And people go to the ballot box and who do they rely on? They rely on the media to inform their choices. They rely on pundits. They rely on celebrities who make these endorsements and stuff. And it's just like, because they don't even know. So they just Google it, and whatever Google says is kind of what they go with typically. So, and then there are people who just vote based on the party affiliations. Oh, Donald Trump, he's the Republican. Anyways, sorry. You know, because and the whole party system creates this lesser of two evils type of false dichotomy, and it stinks. But so the party system is egregious. But what I'm lamenting as of this last Saturday's convention is the nominal winner, Rob Axson. We got to interview him, we got to vet him, we got to grill him, and it turns out he has no intentions of saving the caucus system from SB 54 and from the direct primaries and so on. So, do you want to just talk like a little bit about that vetting process, or just you had some great things to say about the caucus and how great it is? Do you want to launch into that, or do you want to launch into vetting the candidates and the outcome, or what do you want to talk about?
I don't remember what I said on which part. I Yeah, a related note, but not repeating what I said before. I remember the first time Jason Chaffetz had called the House because I was a delegate, and he was calling to talk to me as a delegate, and I said, I'm really looking forward to some pie. And he got silent, and he was like, so I'm running as a fiscal conservative and there's not going to be pie.
Mm-hmm.
And so we chatted a little bit about his philosophy and what he was thinking at this point. And it was just literally a one-on-one conversation with a candidate, and you don't get that elsewhere. I had commented to one of the reporters this last summer, is that, I know these people because I've talked to them one-on-one, and we've been in meetings together, and we've chatted after the meetings, and we've had those conversations. And I was saying, we're the 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 2 degrees away from pretty much every major player in the world, because I've shook the hands of our senators and our congressmen, and they know Trump, and Trump knows Putin. And we have this direct line of communication with these people because of the caucus system, because of this process that other states don't have. They have a huge separation between them and their elected leaders. They haven't looked into their eyes. They haven't had those conversations. So when Hatch was running again in 2012, um, there was, of course, this huge swell to get him reelected. And I had asked a few people, have you ever talked to the man? Have you looked into his eyes? Because I had gone to DC. We had stood in his office. We had looked in his eyes, and I could see that he was having some troubles. And it greatly concerned me that everybody was trying to get him reelected again, because I felt he was going downhill. And it wasn't just his philosophies and what he'd been exposed to there. The man was struggling. And so when you have that direct connection with those candidates, it gives a far different perspective on the entire situation, and they are human beings, and you are noticing strengths and weaknesses and hearing the tone of voice differently than you do when it's a 30-second TV spot.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love all of that because I'll put it this way. I found that vetting John Curtis, for example, I hounded him at like almost every one of his events. Every time I found out that I could get to one of his events, this was 2022 when he was running for the House, and I was like, I want to be there. And so I would go and show up in person, and it didn't take me very long to figure out what he was really after, because it's a lot harder to hide who you are and what you stand for when you're sitting in a room full of 30 very talented, very intentional people who are grilling you and really want to know what you stand for. He gets put on the spot, right? And that's embarrassing, frankly, when I ask him questions like, "Hey, do you believe in or are you familiar with what the Great Reset is?" He's like, "I don't know what that is," and it's just like, really? Okay, and stuff like that. But yeah, one of the opportunities I had with Rob Axon was, I had an actual phone call with him, and he actually picked up, which was great. And I asked him some questions, and in hindsight, they weren't the best questions because they were kind of idle hypotheticals, which are not really great questions to ask a candidate for political office. But at his event, the infamous J-Dogs event in Salt Lake City, I was apprised of that one, and I had some free time, so I'm like, I'm just going to go to that. I'm not a resident of Salt Lake County, but I was like, I do this. I'm just like, hey, he's got an event there. Let me go. Let me go check it out. And it was really eye-opening just right out of the gate because, among other things, he talks differently to a crowd of Salt Lake County delegates. He knows the majority of whom are probably more left-leaning, more moderate aligned, and so on. And there were several people there who raised their hands and were like, "I'm a moderate. I don't feel like I have a place in the party here." And he's like, "You should definitely stay. And here's why there's a place for you." And he talked up these points like, "I want a big tent party. We're going to recruit the youth in unprecedented numbers to ally with our party." That was his answer, by the way, to the question of how are you going to get SB 54 repealed. His exact strategy was, let's go spend and I quote him, limitless money to go and recruit young people into the party and grow the party apparatus. And that way we will have strength to go and repeal SB 54. And so I wrote this up and I was like, okay, all right. I recorded the whole event on audio, and you can find quotes in there where he's saying things like, just 5 minutes before when he's talking up the idea of recruiting the youth as though that's the way to get SB 54 overturned, he openly admits, like almost half jokingly, he says, 18 and 25-year-olds, they don't give a fig for the fight on SB 54. And I'm like, yeah, out of your own mouth, dude. Like, they don't care. And yet they're their solution, right? And so, and I asked a question at that event, and the specific question was that, well, I asked it because he's been criticizing Phil over going the litigation route, which he claims would, he's criticized Phil for, that would bankrupt the party and everything, and it's impossible. And so I was like, okay, so what would it cost? Since cost is clearly a concern, right, to get SB 54 repealed through the legislative route, and what's your plan? How long is that going to take? And that's when he gave me the, quote, limitless figure. And I'm like, oh, wow, great. And he didn't even answer the question in terms of SB 54, which it took me 2 times asking the question, too, to get him to answer and try to give a dollar amount. And caveat this, he said, initially, he's like, I can't tell you. I don't know. Like, I can't give you a dollar amount, but limitless, right? And we can't spend too much money, basically, growing the party kind of thing. And I was like, okay, all right, so we just confirmed you have no plan. And if you claim to have a plan, then your plan like is vastly more costly than Phil Lyman's plan, because at least his is going to take, you know, who knows, a few $100,000 to litigate whatever issues come up with, out of SB 54, which with the party's backing would be a lot better spent, much higher likelihood of succeeding, which is why I wanted Phil to win the chair position, because then he could actually fight both fronts. He could actually grow the party in a way that would, you know, tailor it more towards repealing SB 54. And, but yeah, with Rob, I could just see that was not going to happen, because the question was, how are you going to end SB 54? And his answer was simply, give us money so we can grow the party apparatus through big tent conservatism and recruiting more young people and moderates. Like, that was his message. And I'm just like, okay, so it's not even pointed in the right direction. You're making the party, you're pushing it further left. You're making it more blue. How is that going to solve the problem that we need to make it more red? And so his campaign slogan, the redder the better, is just flatly dishonest. It's flatly dishonest. And if he wants to come and take me on that, and I've got receipts. I can prove that he was being disingenuous and he doesn't really have a plan to repeal SB 54. Anyways, it's just basic logic, basic common sense, and I'm honestly appalled that a lot of the delegates didn't arrive at that understanding. And I think a lot of it does come down to what you said earlier, that we coddled the delegates too much, because we say we want people to sign up for these positions, right? And so in that process, we water down what are the responsibilities of it and kind of make it seem easier than it really is. I have several recommendations to fix that, by the way, that would actually spread out the burden and make this a lot more manageable for people. I'll go ahead and launch into those. One is have fewer delegates. Like, if the problem is that too many people are screaming, saying, hey, I don't have time to do this. Hey, this is going to spread me too thin. Hey, I have family responsibilities and such. Then just like make it a more competitive position, right? If you have fewer delegate seats, then naturally, like, people are going to be like, it's not going to be a problem of like, okay, you have a room of 15, maybe 30 people who showed up for caucus night because they actually know what it is or want to know what it is or got an invite, so they showed up. And then you're just going around saying, hey, we need 5 of you to go and blow multiple weekends and weeknights, you know, dozens, if not hundreds of hours researching candidates, going to events, quizzing people, going to a convention, and voting your conscience. Like, I mean, if I'm a college student, which I was when I first got involved in this, I'm kind of like, I got like maybe 30 minutes a week and that's it, right? That's kind of the position a lot of people are in, you know, and that, anyways, maybe they've got an hour a week, who knows? But it does require sacrifice. It does require dedication. It does require getting out and doing hard things. But to me, the fact that we have so many delegates is an evidence of the fact that our convention is being sabotaged. Our convention system is being sabotaged. And it's because they want it to be difficult. They want it to be stressful. They want it to be low competition. They want to have like poorly trained delegates, people who are relatively uncommitted, whatever. It's like we lost Miranda. Yeah, that's just some of the stuff I've seen. Is they? Sorry, we lost you for a second.
There we go. You there?
Awesome. Yep, I'm right here. Super. Great.
Okay.
Internet hiccup.
Actually, that's the second time that it went away. So
Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, I think yeah, I'll be brief, but just like we need to have fewer delegates. If the problem is it's taking too much time from too many people, just have fewer seats, and that would also go a long way towards solving a lot of the problems with the convention, where it's like, hey, credentialing took too long or whatever. It's like, okay, voting takes too long. All right, like what's the size of the electoral college? 538 delegates, which Joseph Smith said was too many. Joseph Smith said that was too many for the representation there. there are a lot fewer shenanigans that can be, imposed on you if you have a fairly small group that can actually vet each other much more thoroughly, as opposed to an enormous group. You have to book a giant venue that costs a ton of money and all that stuff. All that stuff, in my humble opinion, if it's not intentionally destroying the caucus system, it's inadvertently destroying it, but still being exploited by those who are intending to destroy it. And I see that a lot. And the seats that are won by acclamation, uncontested on caucus night, I think are a strong testament to the fact that we need fewer seats. That's one plug. So fewer seats in the caucus makes it more competitive. You're burdening fewer people, but you should be getting higher quality people, higher quality, shouldn't say higher quality people, but higher quality delegates, people who are more fit for that role and who have the time to spend on it. And to some extent, people would say, is that ableist? Are you biased towards people who have disposable time? Honestly, yes. To be totally honest, there's an element of, I don't want to say elitism, but if you're signing up for a role that's a volunteer role that can help shape political outcomes, that requires effort, requires toil, diligence, sacrifice, you better be able to put in that effort. And I absolutely abominate not everybody, but everything that makes that harder for people, harder than it needs to be, because they're intentionally destroying the caucus system. Recommendation number 2 I have there is simply separate out the races. Because if the delegate's only job is to vet the governor and lieutenant governor candidates, boom, that's a piece of cake compared to, it's not easy per se, but it's a lot easier than saying, okay, you got to go vet the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary, treasurer, AG, House representative and senator or whatever, plus all these school board races. And it's just like, if you do return to the constitutional method, our elections are less expensive and we get better vetting. I think that's a win-win. So yeah, those are 2 recommendations I have. The third is to return to constitutional approval voting, which means all of our races would be done in a single round and would be practically immune to the spoiler effect, which I've raised that point pretty often, but the Gadiantons don't like that one bit. So anyway, my read of the situation is that we are now in a position where the caucus system is, if it's still around a year, 2 years from now, I'll admit, I frankly believe Rob Axon. I believe him when he says he's going to spend a ton of money and flood our caucus convention system with a whole bunch of young liberals. I'm like, yeah, I believe you, dude. I don't believe you when you say you're going to take on SB 54. But maybe that's the way, is just maybe the caucus still exists, but now it's just another way to get blue people elected. And that would be super tragic, because then our final check on government in electoral terms would be gone. And I think we just saw it happen. I think we just saw it get destroyed. And I don't blame people for heading for the hills at this point. I'll be blunt. But I'm still here. I'm still fighting the battle, and I'm still, I got involved too late, frankly, and didn't recognize enough what it would take to do this. And so but there have been miracles on the way. I could tell that God really wants us to preserve the caucus. Like that's it's been so amazing what I've seen, and I believe in miracles. I believe in Phil Lyman's message, it's David versus Goliath. But who won that contest? I liked some of the observations that several people made. Yeah, that's right. God wins the battle. He wins the war. A lot of delegates pointed to that and said, okay, here's the difference between these 2 candidates in their speeches. Rob Axon said, look at me. Look at me. Phil Lyman said, look to God. I just love that. Had people tell me that it was just a rambling, incoherent speech. And I'm like, really? I didn't get rambling or incoherent out of that. I got trust God. And you know who's
I
going to
think
win
a
in the
lot of
end,
us
and
were
the
teary
little
over it.
guy. I loved it, and he got huge cheers and everything. And I mean, this is one of the reasons why people were thinking, "Hey, that outcome doesn't the election outcome that they announced after an hour and a half of counting ballots doesn't seem to match what the way the delegates voted earlier in the day. Heavily more conservative, more opposing overreach earlier in the day, and also just the if you were to tally the a score based on the audible response to their speeches, then Rob Axton got less than 33% of the vote. You know, so I'm not claiming that if you're louder, therefore your vote counts more, but it's very clear that like the people really wanted Phil Lyman, and the people who were voting for Rob Axton at least were just kind of like, okay, all right, you know, holding their noses.
I don't think it was louder in particular. I was up in the kind of the back corner, the cornermost spot of the Salt Lake group. Um, and I tend to kind of watch the crowd and try to sense the mood. And I saw it wasn't just loud. I saw a lot of physical movement with the cheers that looked like it was a good portion of the crowd. So I was surprised because I felt like looking at the crowd that they were with him,
Yep.
and I got teary with his speech. He brings the spirit and the humility and the earnestness when he speaks is it's palpable, and I felt like the crowd was responding to that. So I don't know. I mean, the count was awfully close, but it wasn't quite on the direction that I expected it to be from looking at the crowd.
Yeah, same. And that's something I didn't catch. I got an audio recording of the whole convention. The convention organizers can come after me and sue me if they want over that, but if they do, they've got something. I've got a good rebuttal to that. Um, but anyways, because I seem to recall there is something saying you're not allowed to use any electronic recording device at the convention. I'm like, I'm not following that. I don't consent to that. So they don't get to make the rules. It's we the body that are
Well,
supposed to make the rules.
there was at least one other person. There was at least one other person I know that was recording the speeches live. So only one.
Yeah, I would love it if they tried to sue us over that. Anyways, sorry. That's only my dreams. They know they'd lose. They'd lose so badly. But anyways, the yeah, and I didn't catch that because it was audio only. I didn't catch but I did notice the crowd moved. The crowd moved in a big way for Phil, and they didn't move in a big way for Rob. Um, so yeah, we're looking at the spirit of America right here, and I feel strongly, the founding fathers want us to preserve this system, and it's going to be harder now. It's going to be harder because of a few people that didn't show up, and I'm not wanting to blame all that on them because every little bit counts to push us over the finish line, and I think that's a real thing when you have a tug of war. I believe this is a battle we actually could have won. I believe we could have won this specific vote, and there are so many indicators that they were desperate. They were desperate because they had Mike Lee come in and endorse them. They had this whole huge spate of establishment politicians backing Rob, and Donald Trump. Like this, so this is something that's really worth calling out about the convention. Very noteworthy, very historic, if you want to put it that way. When in history has a United States presidential candidate endorsed? Sorry, no, not candidate. When has a United States president endorsed a candidate
Sitting
for,
president
yeah, sitting president endorsed a
for a
candidate for state party
state
chair?
GOP. Yeah.
And the answer, as far as I can tell, is like practically never. This is like close to
Yeah.
unprecedented. It's vanishingly rare. I searched the internet. I don't know of any documented case of this happening before. Allegedly, I think somebody earlier today was saying he endorsed a few different state party chair candidates simultaneously, more or less. But yeah, unprecedented. So it's like, okay, you're calling in all. I don't know that they could have done anything more than they did to try to prop up Rob and make it look like a good candidate, and yet it was still
Yeah.
that close. So, welcome, Rachel.
Which to me gives me
Yes.
hope. And like I was saying, I'll repeat the one thing I remember saying earlier. If we're going to hell in a handbasket, I'm going to do everything in my power to slow the
Yeah,
descent.
exactly. We need parachutes.
So this is not the time to bail. It's the time to get more involved, to educate the people around us about the caucus, to find those that are having that energy and that spirit with them, and that includes the youth. And I don't think they're all liberal. I
No.
bring my daughters to things as much as I can. I have since they were young, and my daughter was one of the delegates this time, because I needed a replacement, and I'm also precinct chair. And so those getting out to the people and putting in that effort is really what we need to do. When we educate the people, then they can help make those choices. But if we just sit back on our laurels, or heaven forbid jump ship, it's definitely over. And
Yep.
I'm not personally one who can just say, okay, well, then forget it and throw in the towel. We have to keep up that effort. If we don't, then we're at fault. And
Yeah.
some will say, well, it's going to get worse. We know it's going to get worse. It was prophesied to get worse. We know that Salt Lake is an evil center in the last days, etc. Okay, well, again, we don't know the exact timeline that the Lord has laid out. It could be 10 years, it could be 30. We don't know. So if we don't do everything in our power to save as much as we can, to work as hard as we can, then we're liable.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I will continue to push.
Absolutely. And the timing could depend on ourselves as well. And that's
Hmm.
that's an encouraging prospect, honestly. It's
Yeah.
a weighty responsibility, but imagine we can actually do something. That's great. Um, I wanted to give a welcome here to Rachel, and Scott's also connecting his audio. I don't know if he's going to be able to hear us yet, but if you want to, you're welcome to give us a little intro. Just say hi, give us your thoughts on the convention. We're just kind of shooting the breeze a little bit and sharing some of our thoughts and feelings on what happened on Saturday.
I think it went a lot more smoothly than the last time. Um, I appreciated that we didn't have to listen to Cox. Um,
Yep.
I I also appreciated the fact that we did paper ballots, and I also was appreciative of the fact that all of the politicians that wanted to get up and speak and toot their own horns did so after the vote, so that those who didn't want to listen to it could leave. Not that I would encourage anyone to leave. I stayed the whole time, but um, I feel like it's my responsibility as a citizen of, you know, Utah, and I'm leg chair, so to stay and observe and just be there. So
Well, that's great. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you about limiting the time that politicians can talk to us. I experienced this in a recent Utah County convention. Man, like I was so bummed because I was running for the SEC, and we got 3 minute speech. No, it wasn't even 3 minutes. It was 2 minute speeches each. So there were 11 of us running for 6 seats, and that was going to take a little while. And I just kind of raced through very brief list of talking points and all that, and then we had our first round of voting, and then immediately after the first round of voting, while they're counting the ballots, they have these politicians get up and just talk to us for half an hour and this stuff. It's like, talk about how great they are and how they're totally not backstabbing us on Capitol Hill. And I'm like, yeah, that guy's lying. And I needed to get up a second time and like actually say something. And then one of my fellow candidates in that race made a motion to end all further uh, candidate speeches. And I'm like, what? And that was
I
that was
thought about
awful.
doing that. Oh my gosh. So like I thought about standing up and making a motion that we limit all legislative speeches to 60 seconds or less.
Well, that somebody did make a motion, right? To say let's keep him to 30 seconds. I love that. That's great because it's not supposed to be an advertising platform. It's not supposed to be free, press for
Yeah.
people who are already political officers. We're
And
supposed to
that's
be the grassroots
exactly
here.
they're taking advantage of the fact that we're all delegates, we're all gathered together, and they're taking advantage of the opportunity of that platform. It's total weasel move.
I I do I do want to make a comment on that though. I actually had a question that I was chatting with a friend recently on for those that we have elected, what is the responsibility of them to come back and basically return and report. And so this is their opportunity to return and report. And that has validity. They are coming back to those that have elected them. So on that basis, I would love to see it a lot more often be town halls, legitimate, where we can actually have question and answer. I did like the sit down interview style this time a little bit better than just getting up there and giving speeches and getting to tell us what they think they've accomplished. But there is definitely something for the return and report, and to the body as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's a cool idea.
Yeah, one of the things that bugged me was the RSVP list because I don't know how did you all feel about that? Because you
I
had the
didn't do it.
message go out early on that said
Yeah.
you are required to RSVP in order to be let into the convention, whether you're a delegate or member of the general public, whatever. And then later, Aaron Bullen goes on to the group and says, "Yeah, it's not actually required, but still, you should." Anyways, just like our party doesn't have authority to even ask that of us. What are they going to use that info for?
They're
And
training us. They're trying to train us to
okay, I want to
comply.
hear more about
That
that.
that's just my opinion. They're trying to train us to comply. So, they can keep track of who's compliant without asking questions and raising a fuss. It's kind of like that whole real ID thing. Like, what kind of crap is that? They tell us that on May 7th, it's going to be the law that you cannot fly even domestically without either a passport, or B, a real ID, which means you have to take your regular driver's license or your regular state ID back into the DMV. And I don't know if you pay an extra fee or what it is to get that magical pentagram mark of the beast on the upper corner of your license with the words real ID stamped at the top. I refuse to comply. So I do plan on going to visit my family and friends back home where I was born and raised in Tennessee and Alabama. And I applied for a passport this week. So I think they're just trying to train us. I think the whole goal of the real ID is so that we will be trained to take the next step, which is everything goes digital, like they already have digital ID in place as a legal form of carrying your ID in Utah. And a lot of cops just kind of expect people to have it. A friend of mine got pulled over and the cop was like, "What? You don't have a digital ID?" She's like, "No, and I accidentally left my wallet at home." And so like the cops are already expecting people to be compliant with it. And it's just like one extra step. And so I don't know if it's as all insidious like that within the Republican GOP, but I do believe that there are people installed in all areas of our lives, especially political or maybe um, you know, different areas of authority in churches too, in places like anywhere where people are gathered, any kind of organization, there's going to be bad people and who have nefarious intentions. And so, whether it's, they want to be a career politician, they're hungry for power and control, or they like to be in the limelight, they're a narcissist, this or that. Um, we never really know, but for myself, whenever I hear people talking about, oh, well, let's just go join the Constitution Party because we've just lost all hope, I just say, well, Lyman's going to be the next governor, so now he can focus on that. I don't know if he's going to be the next governor, but I just try to think positively and not give up because, I mean, he did lose by less than 100 votes. That's got to say something. And the opposition came out hardcore, with all of this, like Mike Lee standing behind him like he's his daddy, looking on him all proud while he's giving his speech and getting up there speaking for him beforehand. Like, what the hell? That was over the top. I get he worked in his office for 13 years with him and he's just being loyal, but I don't know. He also was instrumental in helping Lyman get his pardon from Trump. So I think Trump just likes Lee and will do what he says. And people are just blind and naive.
Yeah, I my glasses are not rose-colored when it comes to either the national or the state GOP. To be frank, I think we should still keep fighting, but both of the parties are fighting against us full steam, frankly. And this is one of the reasons why I call out the rarity of a U.S. president, a sitting president, endorsing one of these candidates. There's no accident. A lot of people will say, "Oh, he just doesn't know." Well, he endorsed Cox. He endorsed Mitt Romney. It's like, and yeah, one could argue, oh, that's his strategy. Somewhere earlier today said, well, that's what Trump does. He likes to endorse people that he thinks are going to win, and that way he can boast a better track record, all that stuff. But no, me personally, I'm squarely in the camp of I believe it's nefarious on all points. I warned delegates about Mike Lee, and a lot of people were just like, "No, you're crazy." I'm like, "No, I have a really, really bad feeling about him, honestly, and I just don't trust him, and he's gonna backstab us." And there he is, backstab us. Anyways, um, but yeah, with the RSVP thing too, like uh, several delegates pointed this out. They're like, there's like no security to get in. Like anybody can just walk in. You don't need an RSVP. So this is definitely a red flag because it
Yeah.
was they claimed it was for security reasons, and that was a bald faced lie. Everybody knows now that that was a lie. Like there was no
They
security
had absolutely no
function
security, no
behind that.
checked bags, nothing.
So yeah, and that was Nikki Brammer's doing, by the way. I invited her to this call, so she can defend herself if she wants. But like that was the claim was that she and her husband had received like a bomb threat or something like that. And it was like glitter. Who knows? I don't know. I don't remember the whole story, but that was kind of the rationale. That was the cover story to impose that requirement. I'm just like, because she was appointed convention chair last October, whenever, and I'm just like, we don't need a convention chair.
Well, hang on. How do we know it wasn't one of her gay friends playing a prank?
We don't. We don't
It
know anything about this alleged
You
incident.
said it
All that
was a glitter bomb. I'm just
I
saying.
I might be making that up. It was something that they thought was a bomb allegedly, but wasn't. And
I'm
it's just like,
silly.
well, if there's a fake bomb threat, then that's not actually like a good reason to go draconian on us, go all police state.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't trust Nikki Brammer. But this is something we've gotten used to. To your point, the conditioning, right? Is they spring stupid stuff on us every single convention without our consent, and we're like, what gives? Like back in 2022, they're like, and we're gonna vote using clickers, and I heard like this audible, groan from the delegates, being like, no, you don't do that to us. We want paper ballots. Same thing in the 2023 organizing convention. There was actually a motion made saying, we have paper ballots prepared and ready. We're ready to go. Will you do paper ballots? And the convention chair, it's just like, no, we're going to ignore you. We're going to ignore the will of the delegates. And that is one of the big, huge wrestles there. So a lot of the delegates aren't aware of like the rules of how do you argue motions and stuff. But the bottom line is you don't get anything done without the consent of the delegates, of the body. They're the ones who are the decision making body. The chair doesn't get, he doesn't get to make any decisions for you. You get to make all your own decisions. But yeah, like a couple other examples, just briefly. One was from 2023 organizing election, so 2 years ago. Imagine the delegates. We were walking around with these name badges that had like a 4-letter code on it. That was our voting password. And I was like, this is stupid. Anybody can go onto this app and type in like, oh, QXYZ. All right, I just stole your voting password. I can vote for you now, right? And there were complaints of last year as well. So I complained about that in 2023, and then last year they did the same thing. They had people wearing the app QR code and their voting password in plain sight on their badges. I'm just like, this is not just stupid. This is not even just incompetent. This is criminal negligence. Like this is whoever is doing this, whoever is responsible for these decisions, is intentionally trying to destroy the caucus system, and that's just plain as day.
Who would be in charge of it back then, Rob?
Rob was, let's see, so for the 23, that's when I first saw this and complained about it. That was when he was, elected without a fight, which I thought was really fishy, honestly, that there were no contenders. Who doesn't want to be party chair and have all that influence, right? Power. But yeah, that was 2024 as well. So I don't know who the decision makers were, and that's part of the problem. Is to most of the delegates, it's just kind of a black box. And if you're one of the movers and shakers over in the SCC, or you're on a certain committee or whatever, sure, you get to make decisions, but it was all done under Rob's presidency. That's the point. And so, I'm pretty confident all those stupid things would not have been done if Rob hadn't been our chair. So he's been a terrible chair for the last 2
I
years.
don't know. I think maybe he's out to lunch sometimes. Like worrying about his family and his lobbyist job and his own agenda with his business or whatever he does. I think that this is just means to an end to help him climb the ladder to wherever he wants to be eventually.
But the point being, though, even if that's the case, like, that would be gross negligence in your duty, to be like, okay, well, yeah, you made me responsible over this whole thing, but I'm going to see ya. I'm going to go ahead and let some foxes guard the hen house. And I'm going to go play golf.
Right. Well,
So,
Davis County has elected some really good people for our SEC. So at least there's that.
Yeah. I'm going to give a welcome here to Scott A. If you want to unmute and give yourself a little intro, feel free. We're just shooting the breeze a little bit and talking about our gripes, grievances, and observations about the organizing convention on Saturday.
Yeah, hello. You guys hear me?
Oh.
Howdy, Scott. We can hear you.
Yeah, good. Just been a fly on the wall trying to take care of kids a little bit in the background. So, but yeah, I don't know. It was kind of interesting for me, I guess, because I was actually I don't even know what you want to call it. I wasn't the official state delegate. I was one of the. I wasn't even technically a backup. The backup fell through until the precinct chair called me. So I had a week to prepare, less than a week to prepare for the convention, which is kind of crazy. But so I didn't even get to do the RSVP thing. I didn't even worry about that. So
good.
One thing I have heard, I don't know, some people throwing around. Have you guys heard about the way delegate seats are distributed on the county level? I was having some kind of like back and forth conversation with a guy who says he's I don't know, he was claiming there was 250 illegal delegates, that he called them illegal anyway, at the convention, where supposedly he says that on the county level that they withhold some of the seats for their friends and their politician buddies. But I don't know. It's just a rumor I heard. I don't know if there's any validity to it.
I wouldn't put it past any of them.
That's kind of what I told him. I wouldn't put it past that. Yeah, just I'm doing that. But
stacking the
interesting.
stacking the cards in their favor.
Yeah, I don't know if I heard anything about that specifically, but
Yeah,
other than
I mean, that's only
going
the. I guess I've checked to. I've been a county delegate before. This is my first time even doing the state delegate, and like I said, it was kind of more by accident. So I don't know all the processes. Obviously, I know the caucus meeting how the seats are distributed there, but somebody on the county level decides how many seats or precincts get. I guess so I don't know. But supposedly this guy's claiming they cooked the books on on some of the county levels. So I don't know. Just
Was,
interesting.
was this a discussion on one of the Facebook groups?
Yeah, I was on the. Well, I think he's a mutual friend with you, Steph. I don't.
what
Drew. Can't
Drew
remember his name.
Chamberlain.
Chamberlain?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I've invited him
So
to this. Yeah.
yeah, Drew, sorry, where did my picture go? There we are. Drew has been around for an eon or more, at least the 20 years that I've been involved. He's up in Davis County, I think. And he's always had an issue with the automatic delegates. And I didn't even realize, so I'm a Senate chair in Salt Lake County, and I didn't realize when it came about last minute that I my name in furniture, but I didn't realize that made me an ex officio delegate until about 2 or 3 months later. um, so that's something that's been big on his list that he fights against. So that's what he's referring to.
I did hear that some people had some issues with county. Let's see, that they got replaced, um, possibly based on those RSVP lists. So that was one. I don't know whether that happened, but that's definitely a nefarious possible purpose for an RSVP list.
Jensen was mentioning 100.
Oh yeah, in
Yeah,
Salt Lake
he
County
was
they
he was saying that we
overturned.
replaced 100 within Salt Lake County. I know as I said earlier, my daughter was one of the replacements that I was in charge of replacing because one of my gals dropped off and said she wanted nothing to do with it anymore. Um, and I was perfectly happy for that because she had voted for Cox on the last round. So it was in charge of we had a big push in Salt Lake to make sure that we were contacting our people, that all the House district chairs or ledge chairs, whatever you want to call them, were contacting all of the precincts and making sure that the precincts were in contact with their delegates and really pressing for them to be aware of the date, make sure that you're ready. If you're not going to be able to attend, we need to replace you by such and such a date. And that was a big push in our county.
That's great.
Well, there was something that, yeah, on the automatic delegates point, and on the point of people getting replaced. This is a great reason why we need the delegate lists, and we need, how they were put in office. Was it through they were actually elected by their precinct members, or was it they were put there? Were they appointed by a precinct chair? Was it who put them there, right? And that way, that could help to answer questions like what happened with these 100 delegates in Salt Lake County? Where is that turnover coming from? And because, yeah, it creates a problem when you could just, exhaust or purge these people that you believe are voting in the other way or whatever, or you're just cycling out seats and selectively recruiting people who could vote for a certain candidate. I mean, the very fact of asking for an RSVP creates a condition where the election could be engineered, because they have the, if you know from social media or from others reporting on them, you'd know, hey, this person's really likely to vote this way, that person's really likely to vote that way. It gives you really fine-grained polling information. And that way, if there's a county party where they want to go and replace some delegates and say, well, we want more impetus behind Rob, right? That gives them power to do that, and nobody would know about it. So that's a serious problem.
I did poke was it the website? I think today actually I was on there just curious, and I noticed they did have a delegate list, but I mean, it wasn't anything you could easily search. It was like
There's, yeah,
130 pages that you could click through.
There's
And
no contact info, nothing. It's just the name.
yeah, just the name, isn't it? I
That's
can't
just the name.
remember.
That is
So,
all they
and,
provided.
and I knew I wasn't on there. There was someone with my last name on there, but it obviously isn't kept very up to date. I mean, like I said, I was put in short notice, but still.
Yeah.
I heard that the website got hacked.
I saw somebody saying that earlier. What happened on my end? I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here just so you can hopefully see a little bit of this. So yeah, I went to the UTGOP website, and it didn't look like this. It looked like something different. Maybe I could pull up what it did look like, but it looked like this. It looked like this. It was this sign-in page, login.nationbuilder. So it took you, if you typed in utgop.org, it would take you straight to here. And you couldn't access anything on the site. And I think that was part of the reason why people were saying it was hacked. I don't know if that's true or not, because this nation builder thing is still part of the site. But I know they were talking about, let's go ahead and have a special sign-in thing of something Rob was talking up and taking credit for, was we're going to have a more customized experience, yada yada.
Right.
But anyway, so that's possibly where that's coming from. As far as I pulled up the rules. Sorry, and here we go. No challenges. Let's see the other one. No challenges will be sustained against delegates who are selected according to their county's rules. According to people who've been with the caucus system for a long time, that's new. I don't know when that was added. I could research that, but that's not appropriate. Because,
I'm pretty certain that's something Drew was pointing out to me that he was angry about.
yeah, well, because the delegates are supposed to be able to challenge anyone's credential. We're supposed to be able to vet who's even voting in our election, right? And if the delegates don't think that the automatic delegates should be there, which according to our own party constitution, apparently they shouldn't be. That's why they're called illegal delegates. And we have a right and a responsibility to raise that issue and vote them out before the voting begins. So that's actually a pretty big issue. I think we need to chase that down. Because with all the politicians, all the super delegates, people who just get an automatic seat, they were not elected by anyone in a precinct, and yet there they are voting in our elections. They shouldn't be there. They're outsiders. They're infiltrators, and so that's a serious problem.
Is that the bylaws you're looking at, or is that just some random?
This is the convention rules. Convention rules.
Oh, convention. Okay.
So
I don't know what the process is for amending those. But.
I don't know off the top of my head, but somehow this wording made its way in here, which is frankly just a cheat. Drew was saying that, yeah, they've challenged the credentials for the automatic delegates almost every year for many, many years, and only one time has the chair even taken their request with the slightest bit of seriousness, and I think that might have been just at a county, so I don't know if the state has. But yeah, this is actually pretty serious, because it's basically saying, like, the amount of the votes that went for Phil versus Rob was on the order of like less than 5%, I think, when you look at the number who could have switched one way or the other, right?
Well, I think it was 120 or something total votes, which means it would have only basically. I think it was 63 votes. If 63 votes went over to Lyman, Lyman would have won.
That was the switching threshold. But I think the figure was maybe 200 delegates were automatic delegates, actually. Sorry about the 5% metric. I don't think that was right. But yeah, I think it's on the order of like 200 who are actually like basically government operatives who they're infiltrating our caucus. Excuse me. And voting in our elections. And that's definitely a critical mass for tipping the scales on that. So we should definitely be questioning that. We should be vetting who's there. My humble opinion, I would love it actually if politicians just got completely uninvited from our caucus. That's what we need to require an RSVP for. We need to know the politicians showing up, and we need to be able to keep them out, because politicians just don't belong here.
Wasn't that one of the proposed? I can't remember if it was one of the resolutions or
the amendments.
One of the amendments, yeah, and it was like, was that one of the ones that was just declared invalid before we could even vote on it? That's the other thing I felt like weird about is there was a couple like that. I'm like,
that quick.
Sorry, what was that, Rachel?
I said they squashed that one quick.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they did.
it didn't even get a chance to be voted on. I don't think. I could be wrong. There were so many things we voted on that day, but I just remember there were a couple of things where it's just like, oh, this we declare this one like out of order. We're not even going to vote on it. I'm like, okay. I was
But
going to vote yes on that one probably, but okay.
I think with the one that would prohibit, that would reserve SCC seats for people who are not politicians or they're lobbyists and so on. That one, I think, did get voted on, but didn't pass. I seem to. There were several points where the MC said something like, "Well, if you vote no on this, then or if you vote to stop talking about this, then you'll save more time." And that's like the winning argument, the trump card that they can deploy whenever they want to try to expedite something because yeah, the delegates are pressed for time and they're trying to do all this business. Imagine it like this, the Continental Congress or something like that. We're trying to figure out the Constitution. It's just like, okay, you got 2 minutes to decide this really important issue. And it's like, too
That,
much pressure.
that's
And this is,
exactly how they operate in the last week of the legislative session every
yep,
year,
yep,
or
that's right.
every 2 years, whenever they have the legislative session. They always push through 90% of the bills in the last week, like they're having a race. And then
Yeah,
they get up
and
there
Yeah,
at the end and congratulate each other. Well, I got this many bills through. Well, I got this many.
there were a lot of poison pills this last legislative session. There were a lot. Like
uh,
they're installing a police state right under our noses. SGR.
yeah. Shouldn't be that way. I know there was a one of the representatives up in. I think it was during the whole flag thing. Voting on the state flag. One of them, I think, was Tyler Clancy in Provo. I don't. He used to be my representative, and I was talking with him. It was a couple of years back, but he's like, yeah, the whole reason that thing passed is because it was just I'll scratch your back on your bill if you'll scratch my back on mine, and so that's how we got it.
Oh, that
So
makes me so mad.
oh, sorry.
I said that just the whole flag thing makes me so mad because I sacrificed many a lunch break. I'm a single mom. I work 2 jobs. Okay, and I got my kids to walk with me and collect signatures door to door. I went to gun shows and hunting shows down at the expo and collected signatures and filled so many packets. And then just to find out that, oh, well, this has one signature that's invalid. And then they would toss the whole packet and then say, oh, we didn't get enough signatures. And it would take me sometimes a whole week or two to fill a whole packet of several hours of getting signatures. And so, just to even get it on the ballot. So like, it, for them to just push that bill through the committee and and it cost our state so much money to change to this generic looking Marxist flag and destroy the symbolism of our heritage and our culture here in Utah. It just it infuriates me.
Yeah, the thing that really angers me about it is that do you think they have to follow those same rules when they're doing their SB 54 stuff? Absolutely
What?
not.
No,
They
no,
they
no.
don't have to get specific numbers from each county or anything like that, like we do if we try to do something like the flag referendum.
That's,
Hmm.
that's kind of the finding with all these things. We the people are in check. Our government is not being kept in check. It's a war of economic attrition at many points, because it's super easy for them to ramrod through all this garbage that should never have been passed, and it's super difficult for us to undo any of it. It's a little bit like the Dr. Seuss book, The Glunk, where I don't know if you ever read that book, but there's this girl who had thunked up a glunk, and the glunk is this odious monster that just gets into everything, makes a mess out of everything, and it's just really hard to unthunk the glunk, to unimagine this monstrosity, and it's kind of like putting the genie back in the bottle. Um, it's and Lord's been very clear in the Doctrine and Covenants and elsewhere, saying, hey, it actually does require bloodshed to restore peace and freedom after you have allowed your government to get so bad past a certain. And that's a terrifying prospect, but at the same time, like Lord really doesn't want it to get that bad, and I've seen miracles along the way to preserve this, but yeah, if we don't do enough, then it's not going to be preserved. I have the proposals sheet up, by the way. If you wanted to look at that at all, we can share the screen on that once again.
Sure.
Look at that. So I don't know if I can zoom on this. Let's see. It's not. There we go. Maybe. All right. So this was put together by Bob McEntee, and I think he's got some good insights on some of the issues. Others I might disagree with him because he's got them highlighted in green basically if he likes them, and if not, then he's got his comments here as to his reasoning and his rating and so on. Yeah, platform amendments, budget fiscal year, that one was just a shoe-in. Precinct definition. Go ahead and stop me if there's any one of these that you want to talk about. Maybe just going through line by line is probably the easiest way for me not to lose my place on this. But yeah, allowing platform amendments allows delegates in any state convention to consider platform amendments. There was some back and forth on this.
So have any of you heard of the group Utah Citizens for the Constitution?
I have, yes. It's run by Jen
Are
Brown.
you a part of your local impact council?
I am.
I'm the head of mine.
Oh, sweet. So am I. So yeah, if any of you are not involved, please get involved because I feel like those talking points that we get every week are very helpful in keeping in close contact with our representatives on the issues that really matter.
Yeah, I agree.
What group was that?
It's called Utah Citizens for the Constitution. It's split into about 75 different groups called impact councils, and there is a chair over each group, and they get into just a text group thread, and there's a main chat on Telegram that Jen Brown is in charge of, and she's over all of the groups. But she goes she goes up to the Capitol, and she goes to many different events, and she stays in close contact with what's going on at the Capitol and in the legislature and just different things that are going on with bills and issues that are coming up for votes at different times. And she'll just shoot us out a weekly talking point. Sometimes it's a point of gratitude for something good that has happened. Sometimes it's, hey, we, the people, feel this way about this issue. Please, pay close attention to that when you go up for a vote next week or whatever. And so we just send these out to our group, say, hey, don't forget to shoot your weekly talking point out to your rep. And then everybody in the group will then blast our rep with text messages, emails, phone calls, all giving the same message that we, the people, so that way it's an organized effort. It doesn't take a lot of time. And it keeps us holding our reps accountable in an organized fashion to make sure it happens on a regular basis.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, that sounds like something might be good to take a look at because I know, yeah, trying to keep track of everything they do up there on Capitol Hill, like you said, there's that, like their last week where they try and lightning put everything through lightning fast.
Yeah, do you see the screen share?
Yeah.
That's the page and the phone number and the email for Jen, who's in charge of it. And that picture at the top with the scales, she has t-shirts for sale that help support the group, and those t-shirts are so cool. I love them. I got my mom one. She loves hers, even though she lives in Alabama.
Cool.
Yeah, so those are broken up by House district. And no, on a related note, tomorrow is interim day up at the Capitol.
So what's going down?
So during interim, we've got, let's see, this is still May. So May and June, no, May. Now I'm questioning whether or not it's June. July, definitely they take off. I believe they're back in August, so it may be June and July that they're off. But the impact council or the interim councils committees are each committee it's broken up like it is during the regular ledge session, but instead of having a Senate education committee, it's a joint education committee. So you've got House members and Senate members on these committees together. They're talking about the issues. Bills are brought up that maybe they are trying to prepare for the upcoming session. Things that were kind of left over from the last one. You'll sometimes hear them discussing during the main ledge session that, okay, maybe that's something that we'll bring up during interim and we'll study out more and have some more education on that during the interim sessions to prepare for next year. So there are definitely things that are going on throughout the rest of the year in preparation for the next 45-day legislative session.
Right. Oh, that's really good
So
information.
you can go directly on the le.utah spelled out.gov site and see, just make sure that you're on the right day. You can see the calendar there, and it's always a Wednesday. I think it's the third. Is this the third week? Third Wednesday of the month. They'll take off a couple of months, come back for a couple of months. And obviously they'll take off December in preparation for January, but there's still several interim sessions throughout the year. And so just go to that main webpage. It lists all of the committees, and you can see what's going on the agenda, etc. And
Cool.
they break it up just like they do during the ledge session, where some are in the morning, some are in the afternoon. So
Mhm.
choose your committee. You can have that information sent to you as usual when you sign in on the website, to keep track of those. You can keep track of all of them or particular ones, so you can see what's going on.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, that's been helpful.
I've got to jump off here, y'all. I have to get up at work early in the morning, but thanks for pulling this together, Seth.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Very
Y'all
helpful.
have a good night.
You too. Thanks. All right. So, yeah, I don't know if there were a lot of poison pills pushed by the legislature this time. SGR 9 imposed a blackout period on challenges to laws 90 days after they take effect, starting when they take effect until 90 days after. You're not allowed to challenge them, not allowed to go to the courts and say, hey, stop those guys. A lot of concerns about irreparable harms.
Does that cut out referendums too?
It was specifically against preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders. Those are the two things that were on the blackout. Just can't yet.
Okay.
But that applied to like almost everything they just passed. So like almost everything that they just passed this last legislative session, you're not allowed to get a preliminary injunction or temporary restraining order. And there are concerns about irreparable harms, laws that go into effect, like disclosure. Oh no, you just stole your information. No, they conducted a warrantless search or something like that. That's irreparable harms. Big concerns. Excuse me. Anyways, yeah, this is my first time. This last legislative session was the first time that I went to the Capitol building to testify in those hearings, which can be impactful if you're nicely dressed and if people think you have a ton of clout, and if there are like 50 of you who show up on a certain issue, they might listen to you. No guarantees though, because the secret combinations can't do what they want. You can go ahead and just point out that, hey, this is flatly unconstitutional. Right? Okay. Might not even answer you, but I think it's worth getting good at. We can look at the amendments, like, and the constitutional amendments and bylaw proposals that they made. If you have any thoughts or insights on that, there were several I'm really glad didn't pass. I'm glad Aaron Bullen's ones on redefining precincts and so on didn't pass because they're complaining, don't you trust delegates and stuff? Don't you trust the counties? It's like, we got to have some kind of rules to have checks and balances. So we don't actually, because it would disenfranchise members of the caucus if counties could just bulk up their representation willy nilly or do crazy things like that. So.
Well, and kind of what we were talking about earlier, there's already questions about the county level and how they distribute those delegates and stuff.
Yes, and that's vague. I don't know. I don't know the answers to those questions. But we need, what we should do is we should compile a list of what are our burning questions. Number one question I have is, can we get access to a delegate list that includes the information of how they were elected? What is their basis for being a delegate? Was it their precinct elected them? Was it the precinct chair appointed them? Was it their county party came together? Their central committee came together and said, "Hey, we want you." How were these delegates installed?
Well, there's got to be, and that information's stored somewhere because I know when my precinct chair added me and subbed me in, I got like an email notification saying, "Hey, your precinct chair just made this change to, who's going to be your state delegate." Do you think that information could be more widely accessible somehow? But
Well, if we're going to be able, like, if delegates are ever going to take charge of vetting who's actually there and voting ever again, which needs to happen, we should do that every single time. Like, it shouldn't just be like, oh, the party says this many of you are present. Do you vote to accept that? It's like, that's a pretty meaningless credentials report. Sorry, but like, unless there's some glaring anomaly that's evident just through the number of people who are alleged to have been credentialed, that's not really very informative, to be truthful. And who are the people who are credentialing? We should be vetting that process. We vet it on caucus night, or at least we should. We used to. This is another thing that was terrible under Rob's chairmanship, is our caucus night last year was the most abominable, atrocious credentialing experience we have ever had, hands down. And it was because they moved to this ridiculous computer system that was all glitchy and kept crashing and everything. You had to have an app, and it would only work like just randomly, one time out of 5. You tried scanning your info. And anyways, it was so ludicrous. It was such a piece of junk, and it was pretty clear this is either gross incompetence or they're deliberately trying to destroy the caucus system by, making it impossible to do it. Because what we used to do, even just 2 years before that, credentialing was a piece of cake because you did it at the precinct level using a paper voter roll. And you'd see your neighbor walk in, and you're like, "Hi, neighbor, I recognize you," right? Maybe not everyone, but like 50% of the people who walked in my case, it was like, "Hey, I recognize you." "Yep, okay." You whip out your driver's license and you look them up on there, and you're like, "Yep, you're good to go." We're pretty well assured of that you are who you say you are, and that you are authorized to be here and vote. It was a piece of cake. Why don't we do that? Why don't we need to apply that same paradigm to the convention. And for some reason or other, we've outsourced it to a bunch of volunteers who aren't even ourselves. We should be the ones who are vetting who's there. We should be the ones who are credentialing. I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to, next convention, just volunteer and be like, yeah, I'll happy, get people signed in. But the thing is, this is the point I brought up earlier, is right now the logistics behind the convention are just too difficult. It's one of the reasons why you have to have super big, expensive venues. It takes a ton of time to credential and vote and all that garbage. And conduct business and conduct counts. Because there was one vote count where we had a division. That's what he called division because it was close. And it took a long time to count all the people who were standing up. Because there were like 2,500 people there. That would be a lot easier to do. This is one of my recommendations to strengthen the caucus system, is have fewer delegates. I have yet to hear a reasonable rebuttal to that it would be a bad idea somehow. because I mean it would make delegate positions more competitive and therefore more likely to be conservative. It would make it so that the logistics are so much easier and simpler. It'd be a lot easier to vet the list of who's voting, and it would be easier for candidates to make themselves available to the delegates for vetting, because you don't have to take 500 phone calls every time you run for an office. Maybe it's only 200. So I'd be massively in favor of like cutting the number of delegates pretty steeply, actually, down to like
Oh,
a few hundred.
yeah, with some precincts, I know the very first caucus meeting I went to years back when I was in Provo, I was one of 3 or 4 people total that showed up. And so it's just like, I was brand new. I'm like, I don't even know what this thing is. Like, and they're trying to give me a delegate position. I'm like, it feels slightly sketch, to be honest. I'm like, I don't know
Oh,
what's
it's
going
it's
on.
super sketchy. That was my first experience too. That we were like, I think we were literally the only people who showed up besides the existing precinct chair and like one other guy. Like it was like four maybe 5 people throughout the entire night. We even showed up, and then there was one guy who had a beard and a mustache. It was all neatly groomed and everything, and he looked all professional and everything. And he basically said, "Well, I nominate myself for the precinct chair," and like no one contested it because no one else even had a clue what was going on. And so just like, all right, I guess I'm the precinct chair. And it's just like, I remember being rather traumatized after that experience, being like, this is not how we should be represented in government. Now, admittedly, I want to be fairly representative in government. I have zero confidence that this guy will represent me well, actually, but I still don't even know what this thing is, right? So how am I going to run for office to volunteer, sign up for some huge responsibility that I don't even know what it is? And eventually I did start doing that, and I learned a ton by doing that. I actually did go ahead and my first time there, I was just like, no one wants to be the precinct secretary. Okay, I'll be the precinct secretary, right? I'll be your water boy, and I learned a few things from it, but learned a lot more if you just jump in with both feet. And it's totally worth
So that's kind of what I did that year, and it was a good experience. Or I mean, I would just think I just did the county delegate position, but it kind of got my toe in the water a little bit, what's going on. But I don't know. I think the whole thing like that though is it's kind of symptomatic of a very, I don't know, just not enough people care, and they too many people are sold on what's easy, like, oh, just mail me my ballot and I'm gonna fill it out and mail it back in, you know. But and then SB 54, I think it even kind of, oh, I just vote in the primary, and the candidates will be on that ballot. Why do I need to go to this caucus night thing? I don't know.
And they've made it too painful. They've made it too ridiculous. They've made it too egregious. They've made it too confusing. They have absolutely refused to educate people about it. Rob Axon talked up how he was like, "Oh yeah, I've helped the caucus system. I've helped with education and stuff." I'm like, "Where, dude? Where?" Like, I'll believe it when I see it because I'm the boots on the ground here. And until he does something that actually benefits me in my role in trying to help get out the message and help people actually show up and be informed of what their duties and responsibilities would be and how to prepare for it and all that, and have some idea of what the rules are, and do so in a logistically sound and feasible manner, which is 100% doable, by the way, if we return to the constitutional way of doing things. Then I'll believe Rob, but I don't believe him now because yeah, maybe there's some new resource hidden somewhere away on the website and that totally didn't get evangelized, and it's just like, okay, great, then we have people who have created resources. There are people who are claiming credit for Rob for things that other people contributed, so I was irritated. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
haven't
think
seen him do
it doesn't
anything
have.
actually in favor of it.
I mean, it doesn't have to be that hard. I mean, we just have a stupid handout that says, okay, this handout tells us exactly what the precinct chair does, and this handout tells you what a state, delegate's supposed to do, and yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know. And if you have questions, email this person or call this person, and they can answer more questions. I don't know. I don't think it has to be that hard.
exactly. Yeah, Miranda has just sent out the caucus booklet. Very good, and it's got the history of elections in the state of Utah, which, like, okay, sorry, quick detour story time. This is in the caucus booklet, which the caucus booklet, as far as I can tell, I don't know what the original version, but the earliest version that I know of was actually put together by the Keep My Voice people, of whom Don Gaiman is a prominent originator, one of the founders of that. But it actually contains within it. Here, I'll go ahead and share my screen for a minute since Miranda shared this. Let me pull this up because there's some serious gold in here. This. Here we go. All right, so the caucus booklet. There we go. And yeah, it's cool because it's like a foundation of the neighborhood caucus. Caucus is purely American. It comes from an Algonquin word, according to some etymologies. The etymology is a little bit contested, I guess. But you'd have these precinct meetings. You'd have these local people meet to discuss things. Check this out, though. Utah tried and rejected a direct primary system in 1946. So it actually started in 1937. Utah direct primary law passes, eliminating the caucus convention system, and then they turned it into a hybrid monster back in 1946 because they couldn't bear not to have the caucus, which they previously had. So, but it was funny.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was telling somebody that the other day that I don't know, they were going out how I don't even think I like this caucus convention system. Or I don't know. So like, well, it's been around for pretty much all of Utah's history except for the 10 years, and it's constitutionally supported. Like we live in a republic, not a direct democracy, but that didn't get through. But that's okay.
Well, and it was funny because I was actually talking with Mike Lee at the convention on Saturday morning. I engaged him in conversation, and since I didn't really have any questions to vet him as a candidate because he wasn't one, I wanted to, I don't know, I just, maybe not the worst idea, maybe not the best idea, but I was just like, I'm going to try this out on you. I'm curious to see how you respond. And I went ahead and pitched the 3 separate election methods thing on it: red, white, and blue. Have indirect, legislative, and direct elections. What do you think about that? And it turned out, like, I was like, did you know that, like, where the direct primary came from? It was installed in 1937 by the progressive movement. He's like, whoa, I didn't know that. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of important. Like, but in some fairness, I feel like almost nobody in the whole state of Utah even knows that. Like, this is one of the very few, like, vanishingly few resources that even mentions that. The direct primary was installed in Utah's elections 1937 as part of the progressive movement. And here it is, Republicans are lauding and praising the direct primary as though it's totally normal and totally a part of republicanism. And I'm just like, you guys are out to lunch. One, you're not taking into account what the system is, what it does. That's what got us Spencer Cox. That's the purpose of SB 54, is to trigger the direct primary. It's one of multiple different triggers. The thresholds are another one. And how do we not know that this is the offspring of the progressive movement that we think is so fair and representative and Republican? This is not even true. It's like, come on.
The progressives normalized it, and we just accepted it. That's the Republican Party's great at doing that.
Exactly. And I guess maybe the background color is telling here, saying that slightly tongue-in-cheek, but the truth is the Republican Party is actually mostly blue. And the caucus is the only thing that's not blue. It's the only thing that's not blue in the entire system. So, I mean, voters really need to know their stuff. Like, this is... before caucus, this next time around, I really want to go around and knock a whole bunch of doors and make people aware of what it really is. And here's... If I'm going to make a business-style elevator pitch. I already made it to Miranda earlier. But, like, if I were to say there's one thing that we need to do differently from here on out, it's based on a realization, right? what is our number one need? If you go and try to market some new thing, try to do market research, create a new business, first thing you need to do is you need to identify a need, right? What does everybody need when it comes to politics? Everybody needs to be a lot more informed and a lot more engaged and a lot more intelligent in their approach to politics than we are today. How would you accomplish that? Right? Maybe I'll just cite a few evidences, right? One is when people go to vote, they just cram CNN, MSNBC, Elon Musk's Twitter account, Elon Musk's parody account on Twitter, Tom Homan, Donald Trump on Truth Social, Miley Cyrus, what are all these politicians and pundits and media personalities saying? Tucker Carlson, oh, what does this guy think of it? Because they don't know for themselves. They're completely clueless. They don't know a thing about any of these candidates. Okay, yeah, I'll watch a debate or whatever. Oh, yeah, he carried himself well. Oh, he had some stupor of thought. He stuttered some. Ha ha. Right? And they'll just dogpile and gobble up all of these completely brain dead, partisan invectives and propaganda, and they're still clueless when they go to the ballot box. Because, if I went and listened to Brady Brammer's pitch at the county convention, I might come away, and that's all I knew about Brady Brammer, I might come away thinking, oh, look, he cares about abortion, because he's talking up what he's doing to stop abortion. The truth is that Brady Brammer's bills actually enable the courts to continue their abortion ban. Sorry, their injunction against the abortion ban. That's why Roe v. Wade is still a thing in the state of Utah. It's because of legislators like Brady Brammer who are actually giving superpowers to the judiciary in the disguise of fighting them. Like, you look at a bill title and what it claims to accomplish, and turn that around completely, make it the exact opposite of what it says it accomplishes, and a high percentage of the time, very high percentage, possibly more often than not, that's actually the more truthful representation of what the bill accomplishes.
You mean like the Patriot Act or the Inflation Reduction Act? Or,
yeah. Exactly. And Brady Brammer's original version of SB 204 on the judiciary that he was trying to pass this session, that would have granted powers of judicial review to the legislature. They could declare their own actions to be constitutional, unilaterally. No more questions asked, right? That's egregious. So he doesn't want to stop judicial overreach. He wants to have the legislature and the judiciary share in their overreaching powers until the three different branches are one completely solid trunk with no checks or balances between them. I did create a few items of just kind of my own personal propaganda here, as it were, that I handed out at the convention. Pull up the screen here. It's because I think there are some good visuals for some of these talking points. But just I hope you get what I'm getting at here is I'm diving into some of the particulars, but the biggest single deficit is that people don't know stuff, and they aren't stuff. They aren't prepared. They aren't conditioned to fight for liberty. When it comes to
and that's what actually, to me, that's part of what the caucus convention system is supposed to protect against, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be, let's say, you live in my precinct and I work, 2 jobs and I have a newborn baby or whatever. And I trust you, Seth, to go and inform yourself and then go and vote, right? But
yeah, it's based on actual information. And so in many ways, actually, we are doing the work of the caucus in real time, all the time, just by getting to know our neighbors, which is awesome. And that's one of the reasons why it's so effective. But we're not constantly learning about the other candidates for public office much of the time. I learn things about Donald Trump on a pretty regular basis because I'm exposed to stuff that he does, but most people only see the propaganda. They don't actually judge them by their fruits. And so getting to actually see their fruits is huge. Anyways, this is a page I manage here. I just pulled it up. It's got some of my own personal propaganda on it. And, trying to inform people, trying to educate them and stuff. This is a quote where Rob Axson is literally saying that the Republican Party does not actually depend on republicanism. He says we don't have to be a caucus convention party. And this is where we're, I'm talking to him saying, what are you going to do to end SB 54? And the truthful answer is he doesn't want to end SB 54. He doesn't even think we need to be a caucus convention party, so he's clearly not our guy. That was just egregious. Here's a little thing on the RSVPs. For security reasons, you must RSVP. Total lie. Yeah, here's a. Just gonna tab through the thing here. Some of this stuff, probably not the best idea. I don't know. I'm still kind of new at this. My thinking was, I want to have something that's going to stay relevant with people even after whoever gets elected. And if it's Axon, then like, I don't know. I blanked a little bit and I was like, I don't think we're going to have a lot of momentum with SB54. But there are other issues that we should call out, and one of them is, stand up for your neighbor, defendant rights, jury trials. This right here is what I was talking about with Brady Grammar. I have a petition to the courts, to the Supreme Court, to end judicial overreach. Close to zero chance that they're going to do anything with that or even choose to hear it, but basically the judiciary and the legislature and the executive have usurped the power and role of juries. And if we were to restore that, there wouldn't be any such thing as binding judicial precedent and all that. And that would actually end the Roe v. Wade phenomenon in our state. And people need to realize that. If they don't realize that, then they don't really know what they should. This is where he's talking up to the youth. I get it. Not every youth is a liberal, but yeah. And here's one way where President Trump is threatening to do this. He consolidates. If you this is the same on the judicial overreach topic. Impeach the liberal activist judges and replace them with partisan picks. Then all three branches of government will be run by the same party, and we will have satisfied the definition of tyranny according to James Madison. So it could be all red in theory. This is me unpacking the petition by Phil Lyman, which shows how the parties gain power. This right here, it's like, this is probably the main graphic to show that like all our elections today are in fact blue, except for the caucus convention in the Republican Party. That's the only thing that's still red. Because in
you feel the 17th Amendment, right?
Yeah, 17th Amendment killed the legislative Senate elections and replaced them with a direct popular vote. So we turned the white pillar to blue. We had two blue pillars, and then throughout time, the Electoral College at the federal level has been increasingly infected. I think it was as of the founding of the Republican Party, actually, 1856, that was I think that was the turning point where a majority of the states or their electors and the delegates in the Electoral College were bound to mirror the direct popular vote, which turned the Electoral College blue too. Imagine it like this, since we have experience with the caucus system. Imagine that you go to the convention and you're like, I feel like supporting Phil Lyman. I've researched him, I've done my due diligence, I genuinely, sincerely feel like he's the best candidate for the job, most qualified. I'm going to vote for him. But then you get a message from your precinct chair saying, actually, Scott, sorry, you need to vote for Rob Axon. And because we conducted a poll in our precinct, and the poll revealed that the popular opinion is actually in favor of Rob Axon. Now, a lot of people very naively, very foolishly think that this is what representation means. That you have to do exactly what the majority of your constituents want, or else you're being a bad representative. The truth?
My own bishop told me that.
Sorry, say again?
I said my own bishop told me that. I'm like, oh boy.
Your bishop told you that?
Yeah.
What? That's bogus.
Edmund Burke would disagree.
Yeah. Say more, Miranda.
I can't remember the exact quote. It was one of the things that I found out as a newbie as I was learning from those who knew more. But it was basically the concept of if you elect me, you trust me, you know my heart, you elect me to go do this job, and then I find out lots of things and I'm working hard at this. Perfect example, actually. I hope he never hears this. I was speaking with someone who was running for a seat a couple of years ago, and he was telling me a story of a legislator who he was related to. Maybe that makes it a little bit as not as obvious. He had a particular knowledge of the situation, and he was going to vote a particular way. And his constituents asked him to vote a different particular way. Well, in the process of law, because how things go when you're debating bills, the situation completely flipped. And he felt that he had given his promise to his constituents that he would vote a particular way. So that's what he did. But the result of that was completely opposite of what they were wanting him to do. That's not being a true representative. You're not taking into consideration what you know, how the process goes. They are in a position, you either trust them or you don't, but they are in that position to do their due diligence. And if they're just kowtowing to what their constituents are telling them to do, then they're not doing their job. And Edmund Burke was, much more eloquent about it, but that was his point, was that it's his responsibility to do his due diligence and do what he feels is best with all the information that has come to him. He is the one in that position. He is elected to do that job. And I've took that to heart, from that point on, that my job is to elect the people that I feel I trust, that I have seen the heart of, that I've been able to look into their eyes and have conversations about what matters. And then I have to trust them that they know what they're looking at and they know how things get changed. And there's last minute changes when you follow a bill through the leg session. It's a tricky thing. And so you have to be able to say, okay, I trust you. I'm holding you to our principles, and in this case, our party platform, etc. But you have to make that choice. If I'm just telling you what to do, that's not appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, you can think about the president of the United States. I mean, he's got control over the nuclear button. If it comes down to it, he gets awakened at 2:13 a.m. and Mr. President, we've spotted, our radar alert informs us that there are 3,000 incoming intercontinental ballistic missiles. Oh, hold on.
Yes.
We need to take a popular vote for my constituents, and we need to know exactly what they want me to do in this situation. And this is the nature of government, period. You trust someone's judgment. You are voting for someone you actually trust, not for a puppet that you intend to micromanage. And
Yes.
that is one of the reasons why it is so evil and so pernicious to bind delegates, electors in the Electoral College or otherwise, because I don't need to have, frankly, the ignorance of everyone in my precinct. I don't need to take a sum total or an average, and because the truth is, I'm not saying this to be arrogant. This is a fact of life, and it's something that good governments put to good effect, is the fact that some people are more informed and more virtuous and more wise, more diligent, more intelligent in various respects. Those are the people that the prophets have told us we should put into office, right?
We are
And
electing them for that purpose.
exactly, because they would make better than average decisions, not average decisions. And this is one of the reasons why I object to an all-blue government. Because an all-blue government, even if it's functioning perfectly as intended, will just take your average intelligence and in fact, it would decrease the intelligence of the people. That's the effect of having an all-blue government. And I'm not ashamed to say that, because here's why. It's because suppose you do manage miraculously to elect someone who is more intelligent than average, but then you're binding him to only exhibit average behavior. You see the problem. No one's allowed to be above the average, which means it necessarily entails that everyone will, functionally and practically speaking, be below average. And that is intolerable. And a lot of people don't get that. A lot of people don't really understand that when you try to explain that to them.
The thing is, it's all built on this really easy to accept lie, right? Because from a lot of people's point of view, it's like, oh well, they're giving the power back to the people, right? It's the popular opinion, so it's the people making the decision, right? And then really, there's these elites on the top that are using that to their advantage just to get reelected every single time by, oh, I just do whatever these uninformed people tell me to do, and we'll get reelected. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of the reasons why we can't afford to do that. The ideal government is one where you do elect the most intelligent, most virtuous people to be rulers, as it were, to be people who make policies and enforce them and adjudicate things. And then what should happen is that intelligence, that insight, those learnings should rub off onto the general populace. Because, the people say, well, I think we should do that. You go take a poll of all your constituents. What do you think we should do? Here's a hard situation. And they're totally at liberty to do that. Representatives, senators, whoever, can go and take a poll. They can take input from the public. They can evaluate the alternatives, assess their ideas, and pick the best ideas and maybe combine them in ways that make them even better. But they're also at liberty to think about things. And they might do something totally different from what all their constituents were thinking. And then after the fact, they can explain to their constituents, and here's why I did that. And it should never take the form of hoodwinking, but unfortunately that's what you get when you have an uninformed electorate, is that if they're totally ignorant, then they can't tell the difference between an intelligent, virtuous candidate versus a backstabbing, murderous one. So that's a big difference. And it does affirm, in fact, that like the ideal form of government would be one where all decisions are made by the most intelligent, the most virtuous, the person with the highest integrity out of your entire civilization. He should make all the decisions, right? And that way you'd be guaranteed to be getting the absolute best decisions possible. He could counsel with others as he sees fit, but if the most intelligent, most virtuous individual is the gatekeeper of all decision making that makes its way into policy and all judgments, then yeah, you would have the best possible conceivable government. But there are logistical challenges behind that because he can't adjudicate every tiny little concern. And there are also matters of, how do you provide a check against that corruption? Which is why the founding fathers devised this brilliant system, which has these multiple tiers and different representation and stuff. And if we can homogenize the representation, then we've lost those checks and balances. This is why we have a uniparty. We have a uniparty because, practically speaking, all three pillars of our elections have turned blue. They're all blue. Literally every elected official is a Democrat with a lowercase d. There are like no exceptions. Because everybody gets elected through a popular vote. Everyone's a populist in government today. And that guarantees that the public will get dumber and dumber and dumber and dumber. And it's not to say that the will of the people is always wrong. The direct will. That's not always wrong, to be clear. It's part of the system as a check against monarchy, rulership, kingship, as it were, which none of these are. But I have another chart where I don't have it shown pulled up here, but there's in the Federalist Papers. It kind of there's one. I'm trying to remember which number it is. I think it's number 10. That talks about there's a spectrum, right, of representation. You can even either have on the far left end, you have direct representation. The people, the direct. You have a direct democracy. All the people make all the decisions themselves. No representatives. No representative government. And on the other extreme, you have you have one person making all the decisions, right? And that's a monarchy, a dictatorship. And like a democratically elected representative is kind of a few steps away from the left extreme of that, and doubly indirect elected people are like a few steps away from the monarchy on the legislative side. It is a little bit of an aristocracy in a sense. They're not just given power, but it's not an aristocracy. It's a meritocracy more so. But it's supposed to be tempered by all these different things. Anyways, by sampling from things that are not quite the extremes, you get checks. And I'm looking for better ways to explain this to ordinary people, because I feel like if everybody understood this, if everybody could like really feel this in their souls, all that's intended to be conveyed by this graphic right here, when they go to the November general election ballot, the outcome would be different. Even if it's an all blue vote. Like, if they understand this, if they understand checks and balances in our elections, they can actually do a good job of representing themselves in government. And same thing with the caucus. Anyways, I'm deeply concerned that we may have lost our last vestiges of that with a candidate who's not, who has no loyalty to the caucus system, frankly. And sorry, this graphic popped into my head with Rob Axson talking up the big tent conservatism. Is what it really is you have a rhino, blue donkey, and a monkey taking away a circus tent and leaving the, they're running leftward and they're leaving the elephant behind. I think that's how I would characterize big tent conservatism. It's John Curtis's exact talking points. We got a guy who's a party chair now who's basically a hybrid of Spencer Cox and John Curtis. Surprise! He's the two candidates that he those are the two candidates that he stuck up for and defended their unconstitutional actions. So trying to cheat last year's elections. But yeah, I'd say every animal deserves its own stall. If we want to get rid of the contention in our elections, let people vote Republican in executive branch races. Let the donkeys vote for their House representatives. Go ahead and do that by direct popular vote. I used a horse because I don't know what other animal to use here for the legislative elections. But actually, let them be different. Anyways. Oh yeah. One more thing. Rob's unity stuff. It's really just Spencer Cox's "Disagree Better" slogan. That's why one of the reasons why I think he deserves to be known as a Spencer Cox style Republican. And really, what it is he says, "Oh, there's all this infighting." Well, where is that infighting coming from? It's from the fact that you have a rhino that's on top of this elephant, and a donkey's controlling the whole thing. And there are these donkeys. The donkey says, "Hey, you should stop fighting amongst yourselves." But you can see this quite literally from the fact that we have a blue election glued onto our red one. We have the direct election primary, direct popular vote primary, as the gatekeeper of our caucus system, which means the elephant doesn't actually get to do what he wants. The will of the people is being subverted, and then we're being blamed for that. We're being blamed for rightly pointing out that our will is being subverted, that we're not being represented appropriately. And that's totally inappropriate. That shows to me that Rob Axson is in fact a bad faith actor. He's a bad faith actor because he's blaming us for a problem that he is abetting. It's gaslighting supreme. So, anyways, I wish I had found out more of this about Rob earlier on and just gotten the info out to the delegates, because I feel like if every one of the delegates knew this going into Saturday's election, at least 33 of those 63 votes would have flipped. And here's another great point. I wanted to raise this to Miranda. I know we're probably running out of time this evening and getting tired, but Miranda and Scott, and get the ear of everyone who's thinking about fleeing the party over this. Here's the thing. Or who didn't show up because they're like, "Oh, I've got family stuff that I need to do." Guess what? If we show up in greater numbers, even if we think, like I've heard some people say as an excuse for not showing up to the convention, "Oh, the fix is in. The establishment's going to cheat. Rob Axson's going to win no matter what I do." That defeatist attitude. Guess what? Suppose that is exactly the case. Just pretend for a minute that that's unquestionably true. That no matter what we do, the establishment's going to cheat and their guy is going to win the election. If that's true, and we have like 300 more delegates who are Lyman supporters show up, and I'm talking hypothetically now because we're talking about an election that is in the future and have different circumstances, but if we show up and have that show of force, show of solidarity, and actually vote for our guy, guess what? If the Axonites had 300 more pro-Lyman ballots on Saturday to have to deal with, dispose of some way, outmatch somehow, and they still One, according to the official vote counts, they would have to cheat in increasingly obvious and impossible to hide ways. And that would be one of the greatest services to the caucus system, to republicanism, and to the Lord that we could possibly perform. Go, let them make fools of themselves. Let them show themselves totally red-handed, or blue-handed, if you want to call it that. Anyways, if we make it impossible for them to cheat undetected, and they still cheat, that's when we could really get the public in our favor. And that's something we need to do.
Yeah, but I kind of went into the convention with a little bit of a high amount of skepticism of still being able to win, but I went anyway because I'm like my duty, and I'm putting, I guess I'm the line's drawn in the sand. I'm gonna step on one side and show which side I'm on, whether we win or not, I guess.
I was muted, I didn't realize. It feels so good to do that. It feels so good to show up and represent. Even if you think you are going to be that David and Goliath, even if you think that, they're going to win through whatever means, right? It still feels great to just show up, honestly give your vote and your voice to the cause. And that's something I'm determined we could do 100 times better moving into the future. Not that I'm not denigrating anybody's sacrifices in the least, but I'm just saying I think we could feel 100 times better about our efforts and actually win. We can actually gain successes. And, somebody earlier today was saying, I had this exact same thought before he even mentioned it, but he said, the Republican Party, the grassroots, the delegates, we now have to get good at primaries. We have to get good at direct primaries, which is something we've never done before in our state, except maybe during the 1937-46 time frame, because we haven't felt challenged enough. Now, this was stated by somebody who doesn't like the caucus system, by the way, so take that aspect of it with a grain of salt. But he said that we need to get good at doing primaries. And I don't disagree with him, actually, on that observation. That was the exact thought that occurred to me when I said, okay, suppose this Rob Axson guy really does just let the caucus die in the next year or 2 or 3. That's about as long as he gave it to live. I don't think it's going to last more than a few years, right? Okay, if we don't do anything. And if he does do something, he's going to kill it even faster because we know that's what he's determined to do. And if it sticks around, it's going to continue to be sabotaged and rigged so massively. But let's still show up. Let's still show the world that they're cheating, And that would do a great service. But also, yeah, growing the grassroots. If we can get out the vote, if the delegates can get out the vote for a primary, then we can build momentum to repeal SB 54. Because if we could actually make it irrelevant, make SB 54 irrelevant, make the fate of the caucus system itself, at least in a temporary sense, less relevant, that's less impactful, shall we say, because we do a good enough job of informing people about the differences between Phil Lyman and Spencer Cox, then we can win. Granted, of course, if they cheat massively, we need to get the evidences for that. But the more we turn out, the more obvious it's going to be that they're cheating, even in the direct primary as well. So, and in the general election, if they're cheating there too, the more we show up, harder it's going to be for them to hide it. Anyway, that's something that I have faith in. I have faith in the ability of the people to provide a check on the government by being moral and virtuous people, educating themselves in the Constitution and the Federalist Papers, and showing up. But I really do feel like if just give me your thoughts on this. Back to the business pitch, saying this is our greatest weakness. We have uninformed people showing up at the ballot box. There are people who need to do their homework, and they scrambled and did some last minute stuff, and they went to the wrong sources. Untrustworthy, mass media, bought and paid for sources to get their info. What could we possibly do about that? Well, guess what? Most of these government candidates, Spencer Cox, John Curtis, whatever, they only send out a whole bunch of mailers with a mugshot, say vote for me, giving their greasy talking points on election years. And they only do it during the time frames that they've calculated are likely to be most impactful. But guess what? We, the people, can be constantly messaging our peers. We can constantly be teaching them. Just like with the caucus system, we can constantly be vetting our neighbors. And so the more we do that, if we were actually to make a concerted, steady effort instead of a last-minute burnout push to get out the vote on these things, we could have people who are a lot better informed showing up to the ballot boxes. Anyways, what do you think? What do you venture capital investors think of my pitch? Is it crazy? Does it offer something new?
I think, I don't know, just an informed citizenry is kind of the bread and butter of preserving your republic any way you slice it, even in good times. But
Yeah.
I guess one thought that did come to my mind with you were talking about about how we have to become good at primaries. I don't necessarily disagree with you on that because it's the rules we've been given, right? What other choice do we have than to play by the stupid rules we've been handed? But on the one side, though, I think there's a lot of people who might be concerned about the like leaning into the primary way of doing things as legitimizing it. I don't know. What are you kind of your thoughts of that?
Yeah. So here are my thoughts. My thoughts are that if we were to go back to the constitutional way of doing things, which I keep talking up because it really is brilliant, it really would solve like all of the problems we've been talking about tonight. If we were to go back to that, even under that system, there is such a thing as a direct popular election. And that means, and it's not bipartisan boundaries either. It's everyone. It's a nonpartisan election. And so what that would mean is I would actually still have a responsibility under the constitutional system to be good at stumping for a candidate who's going to be put up to a direct popular vote. I would have to be good at getting the word out about it. I'd have to be good at vetting such candidates. So it's actually a need, whether we like it or not, and whether we stay with this current system or not. It's a need whether we have a caucus or not. And I actually I've had a change of heart and mind over the last few years. I actually embrace that. I don't embrace the idea of all of our elections turning blue because it does mean we've arrived at a condition of tyranny. I showed in one of these graphics an all red, outcome and an all blue. The reality is it's all blue even if it's painted on the surface to be all red. Because on the inside, both the parties are solid blue. This explains all the endorsements. This explains the establishment's actions. So to your question of could that be seen as like promoting or capitulating or giving into or giving ground over to the direct primaries, being more active in them would actually do more, I think, to preserve the caucus for all the reasons I've already stated, but also because one of Count My Vote's primary weapons against us in the caucus system is to say delegates are out of touch with the general electorate. Guess what? If we talk to and educate the general electorate better, that gap will shrink. The differences between a caucus nominee and a primary nominee will shrink, which is a little bit of a tactical two-edged sword, I think, because as long as there's that gap, they can deploy that criticism on weak-minded people. But suppose we educate enough people that they're not as weak-minded anymore, that we become less effective. If it's too narrow, I could actually see a scenario where the legislature is like, well, they're producing the same results, so we might as well axe the caucus. And that would be bad. We need to maneuver around that as well. But if we did get to that point by turning the overall electorate more red, we would be in a better position to oppose the legislature on that because we'd have more support for the caucus. My full expectation and my intention, my plan here, Scott, is by having the delegates go and inform the direct primary participants more, we will have more people who only ever participated in the direct primaries and general elections also coming and participating in the caucus. Have more than 10% of registered Republicans turning out for the caucus because we're actually out there educating them. And we need to do that, frankly. We need to do that regardless. And it should ripple and trickle into the primary as well. Any strengthening and stumping we do for the caucus should definitely transfer to the direct primary. Because if you have people who are of one mind, all come into the caucus, all coming rallying around it to save it, they're going to vote in the primary too, because they can, because they know they should. So, anyways, that's in a nutshell my answer. There's a lot more we could get into in terms of like the parties thinking about taking on the primaries and stuff. I don't think we're ready for that, but simply because I think there are so many ways it could be sabotaged and go south. It probably would be, and it would cost a lot of money too, according to Rob himself. But there are ways that we could administer a primary well. There are ways that the grassroots could administer a direct election that would be economical and secure. Miranda, do you have any thoughts?
Yep. I was going to say, on that note, how do we produce an educated electorate? This is where I am gathering people on a monthly basis, at least between now and caucus. I've got a meeting scheduled already on Saturday morning, this coming Saturday, with my local legislators, my county councilmen, whoever else I can get there. And it's a build it and they will come mentality. I've done this before for other things, and so I'm going to apply this. And if only 2 people show up, then you post on Facebook and say, hey, we had a great time, good discussion. Sorry for those of you who couldn't be there. They don't know that there's only 2 people, and people start coming more. We have to educate the people. They have to know that these things are important, and they have to see the momentum, and then they join. So no matter how many people show up, it's still worth the sit down, even if it's only me and my legislators initially. Other people will start coming. It happens. I've seen it. So we will be doing that. We'll at least at the library. The libraries allow the county libraries here in Salt Lake allow up to 90 days to set those dates. So I have them set for June, July, and or I guess May, June, and July at the moment. As soon as we hit that mark, I'll set it for the next month. But so we have at least a couple of hours once a month that we can sit down, and I've moved it around a little bit, not always on the the second or the third Saturday, but give a little bit of a chance for other people to come. And hopefully we'll have a couple of backyard barbecues again. We held a couple of them last summer for our candidates, and I made no bones about it. These are my preferred candidates. If you want to know about the others, feel free to go meet them. But I've invited somebody from each of the races to be here tonight, and this is why. These are my favorites. And we have to let the people know these are the issues that are important. These are the principles that are important. This is why they're important. And they need to be educated, or they aren't going to seek it out, the majority of them, on their own. They're busy. They're trying to get food on the table and the kids wrangled in, and they're worried about paying the bills, and they're not all able to put in that effort. They don't all have the mentality to put in that effort. But if they can understand the issues and know that there's certain people within their precincts that do have that energy and will put forth that effort, then they can trust those people. When I needed to replace one of my delegates for state, I went to one of my county delegates and said, these are my thoughts. What do you think? And she said, that's up to you. I trust you. You can take care of it. Do what you feel is right. So we've had that relationship already built. We need to build that relationship with others in our precinct so that we know who we can turn to. And when they have a question, they know they can come to me and say, what do you think on this issue? What's going on? What do you know? But we have to, it's missionary work, truly. We have to build those relationships. And as I was saying earlier this evening, before you started recording, I think, we used to have more of those relationships more naturally because we were at church together. We were in communities more together. We weren't necessarily working away from home so much. We had more natural interactions. We had activities during the week, not just on Sunday. There were extra things that were going on that pulled our community together. And we are kind of fighting that now. We don't have as much of those things that pull us together in those natural ways. So we have to create them. It's up to us.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. We've got to create that community and so on. We need to take responsibility for our own connections, our own community, our own media. We need to have citizen managed media and our own communication, our messaging, our own vetting of each other. I love it. I think of the American revolutionaries, right? And there was a particular inn that's kind of famous for their gathering and talking politics, talking about the founding principles of America, talking about what they were fighting for, their freedoms. And it was the Green Dragon Inn. So we need to bring back the Green Dragon, this tavern where they meet and they just talk about it, and it's a pastime for them. It's their culture, their heritage, it's their sense of identity. This is, by the way, what football obsession and video games and all that nonsense have taken the place of.
Yes.
The Sons of Liberty, they used to meet and they used to gather around and talk about how do you keep your legislature in check. Who's going to keep the sheriff accountable? Should sheriffs be elected? How do you this was their bread and butter. It's an intellectual task, it's a moral task, it's a spiritual task, and they poured heart and soul into it. And I love that. I would love to bring that back. Go and gather around. Don't break out the barrel of ale and grog and stuff, but let's get some nice fresh fruit smoothies and let's sit down and let's have a real conversation about politics, government. How do we govern ourselves? I feel like the founding fathers would raise like the biggest eyebrow, the biggest powdered wig eyebrow in the entire universe at our modern grotesque obsession with politeness norms. Like, oh, you never ever ever talk about religion or politics with anyone. They're like, in any social setting, you're not allowed. Those topics are taboo. And these men are like quoting the Bible to each other in this Green Dragon Inn, and they're having a great time. They're the defenders of liberty, and they're talking about how to stick it to King George, and I just love that. These are my people. These are the people I hope to be worthy of, and that's what we need to bring back. So absolutely hold those meetings. My honest opinion is I might not want to invite politicians to them because then the politicians hijack the conversation. I maybe kind of understand the rationale because it's like, well, it's somebody already has name recognition and therefore we could expect higher turnout. And of course they have a prepared message, and then they feel seen and heard and valued by their constituents, and then the constituents feel special because somebody who gets paid their tax dollars condescended to actually spend some time with them. But I think, indeed, I know people actually cherish the humble neighbor looking out for them more than they crave the oh, let's get some little cheddar, some little sprinkle of fame onto me because there's this politician. And if they want, actually, this is probably the way that you could have that melded better, is invite somebody who's maybe going to run for office again, and have those basically invite the general public to our meetings where we vet the candidates and have that whole process go on for longer as opposed to just one sprint. And that way, and then we can do follow-ups with them, and we can coach them and point things out to them, excuse me, that they hadn't maybe noticed. Because if there's one thing I think the delegates need to get massively better trained at, it's like, how do you actually vet a candidate? And I understand the whole, oh, let's go hands off and just be like, let's just assume that they're good at it already. Let's just trust them. I'm like, no, like I wasn't good at it. I would love it if somebody who's a real friend of freedom and has been practicing this for a long time could sit with me and point out, okay, see that tactic he just deployed? He's wasting time. Interrupt him. He's bloviating. Raise your hand right now. Shout it out. Just rein him back in. You need to rein him back in. Somebody who can point out stuff like that. Oh, that question, that was a clear plant, right? That was just asking him to rehearse one of his positive talking points that it doesn't actually mean anything. You should ask him this question. Oh, wow. Well, you see what he did there? Oh, look, he dodged the question. Let's have someone else raise a hand and say, you dodged the question. Let's hold him. Let's make sure he can't do that to you. Let's be united. Let's be supportive of each other. Let's be organized. I would just love that so much, and I feel like I can actually do that now. Maybe I need like a 12-inch long gray beard to do that and be believed that I actually have some insight to confer. But I would just love to do that. I'm trying to do that with my kids even. I'm like, I've actually brought them to a ton of these events where we got meet and greets with candidates and stuff. And admittedly, I'm focused on doing my job there. But I do still try to point out to them afterwards and be like, hey, did you notice that? Did you notice this? I'm training them. I'm training them to be delegates and to vet candidates and stuff. And wow, we need that. This should be what school is, but public schools, they'll never teach this.
Yeah, don't get me started on the concept of public schools. But again, back to, yes, they are coming in a small group setting. It's a very different thing. It's not a large town hall, so they're not standing up there with a prepared spiel. They are sitting down. We're in a semicircle or a circle, and we're able to just chat about what's going on and what are your concerns. And maybe I've been somewhat lucky that I have some slightly newer elected folk that are a little more likely to just chit chat and talk about things that actually matter. They aren't as spiel worthy. But we have already, in the ones that we held last year, and I held one right before the ledge session began this year, to just sit down and say, so what are some of the things that you're planning on this upcoming? And, what are your thoughts on that? Would you like our input? And we discussed some of the things that were planned and what their attitudes were on those, because they knew some of the things that were coming down the pipeline, as well as some of the things that they were planning. And we had some of those discussions. So anytime you can catch them in those little groups, then you turn them into a human being instead of just, somebody up there giving their spiel. And that's a worthy endeavor. And then they feel a little more beholden to you, because now you're a little more on an even keel, and you've had a normal human conversation, and they can't buffalo you as easily. So it's helpful to have those relationships and be able to say, hey, I saw that. And I sent several notes during the ledge session saying, hey, I appreciated your comments in that committee, or what on earth were you thinking there? Because we have that relationship, and so I'm able to just shoot them off a text. But
There you go.
that's worthy.
Yeah, well, letting them know that you're watching can make a pretty big difference. And that's good. And helping bring them down to your level, so to speak, not because it's super easy for legislators to get their head in the clouds. And there are times when they're trained to pretend to care what ordinary people like you and me think. But I do see the point of, yes, I've felt some of that before. the important thing is to make sure that they're not the ones presiding or conducting, that they're sitting in a citizen council. And if you could, I think there is tremendous power in this actually. If you could actually abduct these legislators and get them to sit in a circle of council with ordinary people, it might be to some extent, I don't know how possible it is, but I don't know, it's kind of like rehab for an alcoholic. But like, it might be possible to some extent to like condition them into a situation where they're actually like amenable to the principles of freedom and actually supportive of you know, and actually start to think like a real citizen and be like, oh no, we don't want to do that because that'll injure the people's rights, and so on. So
Well, when it's my meeting, not their town hall, I have the control.
and which is awesome because there have been so many town halls and stuff that I've shown up to where it's just like, they really do try to put you in your place. Put you in your place. Oh, you're just a cantankerous somebody who's just got some weird grievances, and you're just bent on misrepresenting it. And yeah, there could be some crazies who show up to a town hall and get a little bit unhinged. But the vast majority, like whenever somebody gets up to like berate a senator or something, like, oh, I'm listening. Okay. Oh, this is gonna be good. You know, I often learn things from that because I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, this person got thrown in jail how many times? Over what allegations? And they did what? Where's the due process? You know? And to hear people just try to weasel their way out of that, and I'm just like, okay, all right, yeah. We need infinity times more of this transparency thing. And anyways. And a lot of people don't show up to things because they feel like they're too busy and stuff. So a lot of it's economic too. So we can help allay those fears and help people actually become, you know, economically self-reliant, as well as just extend promises to them that, you know, if you do spend some time on this, you'll be rewarded for it. You'll be rewarded in terms of your work efforts too. I'm not saying we should all quit our jobs and go do this full time, but there is a definite need for involvement from everyone. Everybody who thinks they don't have any time to do this, they should reconsider, including good old former college student me. Should believe more that this is worth investing in, putting our heart and soul into. Well, I think I'm going to wrap up because we are at 10:30, and contrary to what some have told me, sleep is actually still a necessity on this earth. And I'm going to go ahead and, oh, there's one more thing. Give me a second that I wanted to pull up. So all right, the Green Dragon Inn, that also happens to be a Lord of the Rings thing. So, okay, I didn't find a great picture for it. I was hoping to just search the Tolkien world. Maybe this is it. I don't know. Here we go. Yeah, let's do this. Let's Tolkienize this. Didn't find a picture yet of the Green Dragon Inn of the Founding Fathers, but I don't know. Give it a little rustic, Hobbit-like feel, right? Maybe that's not very
That's sweet.
Because
I like
the hobbits tended not to involve themselves in other things, but there is still the message of the one hobbit who, though he was very small, decided that he could do something. I love that message. I'm going to end on that note.
Awesome. Right. Thank you, Seth.
Thank you, Miranda and Scott. Appreciate your time, and see you all at the Green Dragon.
All right.